Hi everyone and welcome back to the Colour Cave where we like to play with art stuff. My name is Jem and it is the penultimate day of Cavemas and I'm a little bit sad about that because it's nearly over. I am delighted to be able to bring you this video as part of Cavemas though. This has been an ongoing ambition of mine for quite some time now and I'm really excited to be able to share it with you. Today we are going to be looking through my completed copy of Enchanted Forest by Johanna Basford, and this book is particularly special because it's what started my colouring journey and it's also been there when I've needed it, and it's kind of the thing that catapulted me from just sort of messing about to where we are today. So it's actually quite important. More importantly though is the fact that this book was gifted to me by my grandmother in 2015, and once I have filmed this video I am going to parcel it up and it's going back to its rightful owner, which I think you'll agree is the right thing to do. So for those of you that don't have a lot of time, I have already posted a quick flip version which is no commentary and you can just have a look through the finished pages, and this is going to be more of a story today, so let's go to top down view and we can get going. So a little bit of background to this book. This book was gifted to my grandmother in 2015, so really when the adult colouring craze was kind of taking off. And at that time, she was looking for things to keep her occupied, keep her busy. My grandmother is now going to be 98 in February and she's still sharp as a tack. But the problem with this was that she found using pencil was quite sore on her arthritic joints. And she showed it to me one day when I went to visit her and she said, "Do you think that's something that you could use?" Now at this point, I was not interested in adult colouring. I didn't even know it was a thing, to be perfectly honest. But I also wasn't arting either. I was still writing at that point. I've always enjoyed creative pursuits, and I said to her, I'll take it off your hands anyway. I might not use it, but I'll take it anyway. And she flicked through and showed me some of the pictures and she said to me, "Wouldn't it be wonderful to see this all in colour?" And that's always stuck with me, all this time. I started sort of messing about and just doing a little bit here and there, but one thing to note about this, apart from one page, I have coloured this from front to back, and it's one of the reasons I wanted to show it to you because this has been coloured over 5 years and it really shows the progression in my pencil skills and my colouring skills in general, so it's actually quite interesting to look at. One of the things I did do, once I'd finished the cover, I've wrapped it in like sticky plastic, and it's just to protect it. Knowing what I know now, I would have coloured the front and the back cover first and then put the plastic on straight away, and I would have kept the dust jacket separate because I am a great turner of books when I'm colouring, and the back page had taken quite a lot of damage, but I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the back. It's quite interesting to see where things have gone. My gran had coloured a few things on this front page, so I'll just zoom in a little bit just now. And this is all done in Crayola pencils, this first page. And I basically just finished it off. So that's a really good indicator of the starting point of where my colouring skills began. So as you can see, I haven't had the dust cover on it. I have kept the dust cover separate, so the actual inside cover is pretty dirty. It's not in a good state of repair. It's actually coming away at the spine. It's all come unstuck. But this book is well travelled, so it's survived a lot of moves. It's also been to Mauritius and Ireland as well, so it's a fairly well travelled book. So if I just open up the front cover here, you can see where the bindings all come away, which is a bit of a shame. And this was one of the pages again where my gran had made a start. So you can see really basic pencil colouring skills at this stage, literally just a little bit of shading here and there just with one pencil, and not a particularly cohesive colour scheme, but coloured all the same. And interesting to note as well that using the basic sort of coloured pencils like the Crayolas, the colours are very, very pale and not very vibrant. And again, at this point, I had no idea about pencil pressure or, I didn't know anything about stuff like this. So if we move on over, here is the first page. And this was the first time I really sort of sat down and thought, I'm going to put some colour in this. And I liked it because it was symmetrical, which made it easy for me to decide what was going where, and I knew it would look relatively okay. Again, absolutely zero colour scheme there. I did this page in fine liners. This is just sort of trying to decide what I liked and what I didn't like. I found out very quickly that ink wasn't really my thing, but it was nice to be able to do the border around there anyway, and it didn't feel too overwhelming, because one of the things I felt right at the start was that maybe I'd bitten off more than I could chew, because I found even these first 2 pages, I found them really stressful. Like, I wanted to get them done, and I really wasn't understanding the spirit and the idea behind adult colouring at this point, so it really wasn't for me. This was inspired, and the first section of this book was heavily inspired by Peter Hewitt. She was the first person that I found on the internet when I googled some of the images for these books to get some sort of inspiration. She was the first one that came up, and she is an amazing teacher. She's a really good artist as well, and I really liked the colour schemes and the techniques that she was using. So you will see a lot of these first pages are very similar to the ones that Peta has coloured herself, and that was before I'd found colour alongs and tutorials as well, so I was just going from the photographs that I'd found of her work on Google. So I would say that I was actually very proud of this, because this is very complicated. Again, thinking about me as a novice adult colourer, or colourist as it's now called. And I would say I did a fairly good job there, and I really took my time, and this page took me a long time. I did this over maybe 2 or 3 months, because again, I wasn't really into adult colouring at that point. So these 2 pages here, this one's a prime example. This is almost a carbon copy of the version that Peter Hewitt did. I will leave links to her YouTube channel down in the description. She doesn't post videos very often anymore. She's a nurse, and obviously she's very busy just now, but all of her tutorials are fantastic. So again, nothing really spectacular going on here, but I was thinking more about colours and how to blend pencils, and this up the top here on this compass, that was really the first time that I'd blended coloured pencils together. And again, I didn't even really know that it had a name or it was a specific technique. I just kind of did it. So that was quite interesting that I did that off my own bat. And again, just the old Crayola pencils here, nothing spectacular. Now, moving on over here. Again, same thing, lots of inspiration from Peta's pages. And I was terrified of this page, absolutely terrified. And I did this, again, I think this was like months and months and months. And I remember this page because we moved to the last farm that we're at before we were here, and we hadn't long moved, and we had no internet. We had, very little going on till we got the place sorted out. And I spent quite a lot of time colouring because there was nothing really else to do. I also at this point decided that I quite liked the idea of colouring, because I got like a chunk of this done, and I thought to myself, I think I might be able to get into this. So I went and purchased myself a set of the W.H. Smith colouring pencils, and even now, for someone that's looking for a budget brand, if you're in the UK, the W.H. Smith pencils they're really good quality for the money that you pay for them. They don't come in a massive set is the only downside, but there's plenty to be getting on with, and they're quite smooth and they blend quite well. So you can see these are the pencils that I've used for the leaves up here, and I was using them in conjunction with the Crayolas. So I really felt as if I'd achieved something, and I think it was at this point that I decided that I actually might like to colour every now and then, and I kind of started to see what the fuss was about. And when I was finished, I was so satisfied with this page, so satisfied. Moving on over. To this day, this is still one of my favourite pictures that I've coloured, and the reason for that is this was the first time that I picked my own colour palette and did it my own way without any outside influence. I didn't Google anything, I didn't look up anything in particular, I just did it for myself. And you can see just from the colours I've used on the owl, I was kind of starting to get a sense of what went well together, and what should fit and what wouldn't go together. So that even now, that's still one of my standout colouring pages. This one, not so good. I got really brave, I got really, sort of cocky after doing this one, and this is probably one of my least favourite colourings ever. Nothing went together. I wasn't really happy about it, and I tried to do like a wood effect, but you can see as well, if you look at the pencil lines on the wood effect, I've lent really heavily, and again this was with Crayolas, and I really didn't have much of a sense of pencil pressure, that kind of thing, and my blending that I tried to do around the woodwork, really, it just looks patchy. So I was really trying to run before I could walk here, so I was a bit disappointed in that. And that was one of those ones where I thought to myself, well, maybe adult colouring isn't for me at all. First time I tried a limited colour palette. Again, I got inspiration from the internet for this. This wasn't of my own making. And I really enjoyed just sticking with one colour and just putting a little pop of something else in every now and then as well. And I found this less stressful. So in my head, I knew that if I came across a page that was, you know, it was really complicated, I could make it less stressful and more enjoyable for myself just by using a limited colour palette. And again, at this stage, no idea that that was called a limited colour palette. This was just I just wanted to use all the colours. Basically, that's what this page is. It makes me laugh now because if I'd spent more time putting layers down on this, this would have looked absolutely fabulous. But again, I just feel that the colours are really pale, they're really washed out, and it's because I hadn't built up the patience and the techniques at that point. But that's one of those ones where if I could go back and redo it, I would still use the same colours because it's really bright and fun, but I'd really make these birds pop out, and I would use lots and lots of layers to, you know, to achieve that. I really enjoyed this one as well. So you can see I was really just testing the water with all the pencils, like, oh, I wonder what this colour could do. And this was also before I'd found out what a blender pencil was. And if you look around the edge, I tried to put in like a really pale brown sort of vignette style surround on it. And I did it with a Crayola pencil, which is probably the worst thing that you could use for that. So that's another testament to early colouring. It's very scratchy, and yeah, we'll just let that one slide. Moving on over, again, another Peta inspired creation. She did this sort of background with the trees and things, and now I knew I could doodle in some trees. I've always been able to doodle, and I've always known that. Again, huge problems with blending. I've basically got 3 stripes in the background here, so this was a little bit more of an adventure, but I did feel that the picture was really bare, and I agreed with Peta that it needed something else in it, so I basically copied her image and tried to do it myself. And I have to say my drawing skills are much, much better than my colouring skills in this picture. So I wanted to carry on with this idea of using a limited colour palette, but I thought about gradients. Now, I've always liked gradients. Even when I didn't colour, I always enjoyed that sort of ombre effect. So I tried it with a set of pencils, and again you can see that my colour sense is getting better at this point as well, and I've gone from this green through turquoise through purple and into this really dark blue. And I also learned, again unbeknown to me at the time, that these colours would pop out if I used a dull background. So again, that sense of light and contrast was already starting to come into play really, really early when I was learning to colour. So things moved on a wee bit here, and you can see that my skills were kind of starting to improve by this point. I was getting a little bit more adventurous, and I was finding that I was enjoying the W.H. Smith pencils more than the Crayolas because the colour laydown was better and it was less work. It wasn't, you know, so difficult. So this was one of the ones that I'd started, and this was around the time, like, my colouring had really picked up by that point, so that was probably into like early 2017. And this was also the point where we started to have problems with mist. As some of you will know, that mist was the catalyst that made me decide to learn to draw properly and also to start a YouTube channel. And what I found was, before this point, I was using this book just as like recreation and maybe just to chill out if I didn't want to stare at a screen. And at this point, I started to colour a little bit more often. You know, I was colouring maybe a little bit every few days. So here, we get to here, and what was starting to happen now is the Crayola pencils that I was using, a lot of them were getting really, really small. And I was starting to kind of like try and balance out, because I knew you couldn't buy them open stock, and I was trying to use colours that I hadn't really used, so the pencils were long. And again, this is why this is like a sort of mishmash of all different pencils, because I was aware that eventually I was going to run out of these Crayola pencils, and I didn't want to have to buy a new set until I'd, you know, worn most of them down, rather than just because, you know, 1 or 2 were short. So back to the limited colour palettes. I actually really think these are still some of my favourite images that I've coloured in this book, even though it was really, really early on. And I just really enjoy them. They were so simple, they were fun to do, and they've got a certain charm about them. And if I was to go back and colour them again now, I would probably do a similar thing, but again, I would just spend more time layering and, you know, really getting some vibrancy. But obviously now I have much higher quality pencils as well, which plays a huge part in all of this. Another example here of a gradient, and this was one of these pictures. You often hear people saying that sometimes a picture speaks to them, and this was one that spoke to me right from like when I flicked through the book the very first time, and I thought that's just screaming out for like a rainbow. So that's what I went for, and again, no idea about blender pencils at that point, so used a really sort of muted neutral colour in the background, you know, tried to sort of smooth it out as best I could. Now this was a WH Smith pencil, this wasn't a Crayola pencil, so it is slightly smoother, but not by much. But that was more down to my technique at the time than the pencils. Oh my goodness, the acorns. If I zoom in a little bit here, the standard of colouring for the stage that I was at on this page, I am really, really proud of this. I put in little shadows and I really spent a lot of time, but I hated every second of colouring this page because it was repetitive, and I learned at this point that I do not like patterns. I do not like repeating things. It was tedious, but I was really pleased with the way it was going, so I was determined that I was going to finish it. And some would argue this is probably one of my best pages that I've coloured in the book, and I might be inclined to agree, I don't really know, but it drove me absolutely batty, and after this I never wanted to colour another acorn ever again in my entire life. So fast forward to the next page, and that dream didn't last long because there's acorns all over the place in this. And originally this image was just the chest with these few things here, and I decided again that I would make it one of those pages where I added things in. It's got a certain charm about it, and I also learned a little bit about colouring things in a background and making them look far away. So that was something that I'd looked up on the internet for the technique and how to do it. So my interest in what was going on was already increasing, which I find quite an interesting point as well. And again, I really enjoyed doing this page and I was quite pleased with the way it turned out. So I followed these two on from the previous limited palettes because obviously they are, you know, quite similar images if I just flick back to them there. And I wanted to continue that theme, so not much to say about that, but really enjoyed limited colour palettes, good fun. And another double page spread. And again, this one really, really sticks out in my memory because at this point, I realised I was using this book as a coping mechanism. I was no longer colouring for recreation or even just as a stress reliever. I was relying on it as a crutch. Mist was very, very ill by this point and she was in and out the vets a lot, and her condition was not good, and we weren't sure at this point what was actually wrong with her. And I remember colouring this furiously, and I coloured this page in 2 days, and it's just because I needed something to take my mind off what was going on. I was fairly happy with the way it turned out. My blending was starting to get a bit better as well. You can see that on this little door here. A definite improvement in my skills by this point. And the same here. I really enjoyed this, and I started to play a little bit with light sources as well, and that was the first time I'd really done that as well. Really sort of exploring what was going on, and I'd also discovered that white gel pen was good by this point as well. So I'd started to look things up on the internet. I realised there was a colouring community, which I was gobsmacked about, and I'd started to really sort of embrace it. And again, that's like hand in hand with what was going on. I needed an escape from what was happening with my beloved sheepdog, my working dog, my best friend. And having this to sort of occupy myself definitely helped. Probably one of my least favourites here. I just coloured this for the sake of filling in a white space, and I think that shows my skills were starting to develop by this point, and I knew at that point I could have done better than this. I wasn't happy with my colour choices. It was rushed. Yeah, it's kind of like a bit of a misnomer, but we can't have, perfect pages every time. So moving on here again, another one where I'd added in a background. This was originally just a ribbon. Oh, hello. This was originally just a ribbon in the middle, and it's quite characteristic of Johanna's books, and I just wanted to keep adding things in, put my own spin on it. And what took me the longest in this picture was colouring in these stones and putting the highlights on them. They took forever. But again, took some inspiration from Johanna, popped in a little snail. You quite often see a little snail crawling along in some of our drawings. So I was really starting to absorb the inspiration from, you know, everything that was going on round about me. Now this is an interesting turning point here as well. This page, which again, one of my favourites in this book, just because it's so bold, but also it's a pattern, so wasn't that fussed. This was the first page where I used some Prismacolor pencils. Now, at this point, we're like a third of the way into the book, and I was probably a year and a half into my colouring journey by this point, and I decided that upon inspection, again, good old internet and just sort of searching about for colouring community stuff, that Prismacolor pencils were a better brand of pencil. They weren't hundreds and hundreds of pounds, you know, like Caran d'Ache price, but I thought I could get myself a small set and that would be really good. So I bought myself a few open stock to try, and I bought them in greens because green's my favourite colour, and I knew in this book there would be, you know, a lot of use for them. And I really, really, really enjoyed this page. Not at the time, but because it turned out. But when I used that Prismacolor pencil for the first time, it was like a revelation. I'd been like hammering away with the Crayolas for such a long time, and they were coming to the end, you know, they were very diminished by this point. And to have these Prismacolor pencils, I was like, oh my god, these are amazing. And I found that they worked well with the W.H. Smith pencils as well, which were also starting to kind of like get a little bit short. So this was really the start of me thinking, right, I want to colour. It's something that I want to do, and it's a hobby that I want to keep. Moving on to this Dragonfly here. I have regrets. I like this picture, but I have regrets. And again, it was a patience thing. I wish I hadn't filled in the bottom set of these wings. I wish I had done something similar to the top, because I feel that it makes the image bottom heavy, and it looks as if I've rushed it. So I was a little bit disappointed in myself, but you know, this was a fun one. I was looking forward to this. And again, you can see the vibrancy of the colours and the fact that I was beginning to learn to layer my colours up. Everything's just much brighter, and you can see that I've taken a bit more time over this image. And this was really fun to colour. I really enjoyed it. Very similar to the acorn situation. Found this very tedious, but what I did with this was I just left the book open, and every now and then I went and just coloured in one little thing. And the question I asked Mr. Jem was, what colour is Magic Potion? And he went, purple, obviously. I was like, really? Okay. So that's why we ended up with a purple potion bottle, and that was Mr. Jem's first input into any colouring that I'd ever done. It's funny how these things stick out in your mind. I was quite excited about doing this and putting, you know, adding in my own sort of feel to it. Really enjoyed doing the greens around the outside, but I really wanted to put something in. And because the tree is in the opposite, you know, it's like a cutout, I wanted these to match up. And I spent such a long time on this. And this was the first time I'd really used a blender pencil, and it was the Prismacolor blender. And I was exploring the joys of having a blender pencil and adding in the little tracks and everything. This was just really good fun. So I was getting a bit braver, and I was starting to explore things a bit more. And this was the first time I'd used soft pastels. So I really used this as a practice page. And that's why I just filled all this in with black fine liner, because really my focus was on testing out the pastels and seeing what they would do and if I liked them. And you can see my blending's not been that great there for a first attempt. What can I say? What can I say? Not an awful lot. I also learned about fixative at this point as well. I didn't have any though. And this is, you can see there's a lot of marks and things where the page has been closed over together. And it was later on when I learned about fixative, I came back and sprayed this page just to prevent any more of it disappearing. This is the first page I ever shared in a social media group. I joined what at the time was Simple Art for Adults. It was a page that had stemmed from a channel called Simple Art for Adults, which belongs to Erin Jarbo. I will also link that down in the description. She's got some great tutorial videos as well. And this was the first time I'd really felt brave enough and felt that my colouring was good enough to share. I had really good fun with this, and I spent quite a lot of time on the shading. So I would say that this probably mirrors more where my style and my skill level is now. You know, this was the first piece where I really felt that I'd advanced enough and I kind of knew what I was doing. And it was nice to be able to do it with a simple image, and I got lots of lovely feedback on that as well. This Facebook group is now called The Colouring Connection. I am a moderator for the group. I'll leave the link to that in the description. It's a great group. Everyone's really friendly, really nice, and lots of beautiful, beautiful colouring to get some inspiration from. Over here, I was really looking forward to this page, even though it was a kind of a pattern, because this was another one of the pages that spoke to me, and I thought I would really like to do some like really bright rainbow colours, again because I had the Prismacolors, these lovely bright vibrant pencils. And I used up, again, these were some of the darker Crayola pencils that were left in the set, and I kind of wanted to use them up because I thought to myself, I'm not going to buy another set of Crayola pencils at this point. I was like, no, I'm gonna invest in some Prismacolors. So that was helpful to help use up the last of the Crayolas. This was the point that my dog was on her last legs. It was tough. That was really, really tough. I don't actually remember colouring this page, if I'm honest. I don't really remember much about it. I kind of lost my colouring mojo at this point, and obviously it was because of what was going on with Mist, and we kind of knew by this point that we were probably running out of options and we were going to have to put her to sleep. I didn't care for this page anyway, but it didn't provide any sort of respite or solace for me at that point, and I just coloured it. And I remember asking, and I think it must have been in the Colouring Connection group, for some inspiration, because I was void of everything, but I just wanted to keep myself busy and keep going, because I was basically trying to block out what was happening. At this point as well, my Nonna, which is my Italian grandmother, it's my father's mother, became very, very unwell, and she was starting to go downhill. She was in her 90s though, and we knew that, you know, something was going to get her, but she was kind of starting to suffer a little bit, and she went into hospital. From that point, we had Mist put to sleep, and my Nana passed away 7 days later, and I didn't colour for a couple of weeks. So this picture stands out most to me because I took this book with me when my Nona died. I went down home to my parents and spent a couple of days with her, last few days with her in the hospital, and then waited and went to the funeral. So I took this with me to keep me occupied, and turned out surprisingly well actually under the circumstance. But yeah, this is definitely a coping mechanism type picture, and I was quite glad of the complexity of it and the size of it as well. So moving on then, I didn't colour for quite a while after that. It took me a long time to get over losing the dog and my Nona at the same time. And when I did return, I wanted to do something fun. So I started exploring this idea of blending these colours across and just having like a fun background and some nice pastel windows in here as well. And I was really pleased with how this one turned out. So you can see here, these big double page spreads, there's quite a few of them. And I really sort of started to enjoy colouring again from this sort of point. You know, I was kind of getting back into it. I was feeling a little bit better about myself. And by this point as well, I'd also decided to start to learn to draw. So anything that I learned tend to be incorporated in, and you can see I've been practicing clouds here as well, and I think that shows up quite a lot in the sort of subsequent pages of this book, the fact that I was starting the YouTube channel as well, so that was really cool. I really enjoyed this page as well. Again, this was one of these sort of ribbon designs, and I just enjoyed adding in things like the roots and, you know, just having a bit of fun with it. Again, sort of trying to brush up my drawing skills a little bit. And this is the last page where I used a tutorial, and this was one of Peter Hewitt's tutorials. And this was one of these pictures as well that the first time I saw it and I had seen Peter's version, no matter what was happening, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to use that tutorial and colour along with her. And it's absolutely gorgeous, and it's just turned out beautifully. I really, really like it. This little guy, this appeared on the YouTube channel, so we were well up and running with the YouTube channel by then, and it was a demonstration of a pastel pencil background. This was another picture that spoke to me, and all I knew about this picture at the start was I did not want a green frog, so I decided to go everywhere else green and not him, and he's quite a handsome little chap, I think. This is where I think you see quite a massive jump in my colouring skills if we go back to maybe like here. Again, just thinking about this lantern and use of light, you can see how much my skills have developed at this point. Really enjoy using black acrylic paint as well, and I wanted to incorporate this with some nice rich colours. My general colour laydown and technique is much better by this point, and I was working solely in Prismacolor by this point as well, and all of the rest of this book is done solely in Prismacolor. So I wanted to pull a couple of these elements across here, so I picked the colours from the waves and used them for the background. This was one of these pictures that didn't look as if it would take long to colour, and it took forever. This is very deceiving. There's a lot of work in this picture if you're ever thinking of colouring it yourself. This is definitely one of my favourites in this book. I coloured this, I actually put the date on this one, which is something I haven't done in a lot of the pages. It was January, it was freezing, and it just fitted in with that sort of like cosy warm feeling. So that was January of 2019. So that's where we're at in the sort of time scale thing. I used a little bit of soft pastel around the outside just to give us this glow, and I think this is fabulous. I'm really pleased with this. Moving on, no feelings about this at all, very generic, and again I felt as if I'd kind of taken a step backwards with this one. This kind of reminds me of that horrible wishy-washy one back at the start. Yeah, I just kind of get the same vibes from it, so yeah. Over here, this one also came up as, I did a separate tutorial on this because I'd shared this page again on the Facebook group and everyone wanted to know how to do it, so I went for like a wood grain like carved effect here. And I think I could have been a little bit braver with the colours that were going on, but I was more focused on the actual technique, and I actually really enjoyed doing this despite it being quite sort of tedious. So again, if I can find the link, I shall put it down in the description for you if you want to check that out. So after such a detailed page, which took me forever, I really wanted something like a quick and dirty colour in here, so I used some of my metallic paints and really sort of just enjoyed myself a little bit with this one. And again, not what I would consider to be a spectacular colouring, but certainly a lot of fun, and that's what this is all about. Love this page, love the way it turned out. I had a sort of idea for this before I had commenced it, and I was really glad I took the time, if I just zoom in, to put this sort of dark shadow in around everything, and that's just let me really sort of make everything pop out, which I was really pleased with how it turned out. It took a bit of doing right enough, but it's actually turned out quite well. And this next one here, again experimenting with a little bit of backgrounds. Originally in my head I wanted this to be a raven, I wanted it to be black, but when I was over on this sort of maze page, I'd coloured in the little bird in these blue colours just to contrast with what was going on, so I thought I would follow that through. And I decided to do like a negative space background here, which turned out reasonably well as well. I was quite pleased with that. This is the last double page spread in the book before what I call the DDs, the dreaded dragons at the end. And I just had fun with this. I was really into my sort of gold style colouring by this point, and I was confident in my skills to go ahead and do this. So I was really happy with this as well. The water does have a bit of a sort of sheen to it. I don't know if you can see that or not. Again, I just did that with a kind of shimmery white pen at the time. This, completely out of my comfort zone, not something I would normally do. Don't usually use dark pastels, and this was pan pastel, and I just wanted to do something different because I've been colouring all these trees and leaves and everything, and I got out, this is the Gansai Tambi metallic paints, and although it's not the kind of colours I would normally use, it's turned out so well. It's absolutely stunning, and I really like this. Over here as well, I was looking forward to colouring this page from the beginning as well. Our little bird makes an appearance with the key again, and I wanted to kind of play with the light again. So you can see there we've got these lanterns here, and I took time and care to make sure that everything was kind of like reflecting properly in the way I wanted it. So the background, I took a bit of a gamble with the background, and the sky in the background, I actually did that in pencil, which is something that I generally don't do a lot when it's that big a space because it's very time consuming, and it's one of the few times now where I'll actually use a blender pencil, but I'm glad that I did, and it's come out fairly even, and it's got that nice kind of atmosphere that I was looking for. So we're firmly into 2020 now. I have got a couple of dates on these. This was my first foray into using Neocolours, and you can see I use them very gingerly. Again, back to this nice sort of idea of these kind of metallic-y, woodeny type efforts. and really spent some time on the shadows and thinking about what's going to pop out in this one, you know, the different depths of what's in this actual lock. So I enjoyed that experience as well. This one was a really fun one. I just enjoyed colouring them. Mama Jem wanted an entirely purple lion and I vetoed her on that, but I gave her a purple mane to keep her happy, you know. Moving on over. So these are much more recent. That I was looking forward to colouring both of these pages. Like, these were one of the first sets of pages that I actually really wanted to colour when I first saw the book. And I think it's just because it's really sort of tying the whole story and the idea behind the whole book together. And I just sort of mimicked all the little cards that are scattered throughout the book, made sure that they all tied in here and made it look very pretty. And then just recently we finished off this little job. I've got a video on this again, just a little bit on how I've done the pencil background, colouring in some leaves because I'm really good at that now after going through the whole book. This was one of the first things I coloured. I was talking about at the beginning about going front to back. I did this with really cheap watercolour really early on in my colouring journey and it shows. It's really patchy, it's not blended properly, but I kind of don't want to fix it. It's like there for posterity. So I just thought I would just leave it be. And finally, most recently, is the dreaded dragons. Oh, okay, so they are identical, they are symmetrical. So if I just kind of like show you both sides. Now, one of my issues with this was the fact that I'd looked online and I had seen a lot of these all coloured in, and there's hundreds and hundreds of leaves around this area in the background. And when I saw the completed images, I was really dissatisfied looking at them. I figured out what it was. If you have all the leaves in the background coloured in, it really detracts from the impact that these two big dragons have because the picture's too busy. So I was kind of worried that I would feel as if I'd shortchanged myself by not spending time colouring in every single leaf. But when you open that up, the impact of you opening that up, boom, you've got these two really brightly coloured dragons and they really stand out. And this is a lesson that I have learned from colouring recently. And I'm kind of always going on about contrast, but this is a prime example. And I'm really, really glad that I did what I did. This is just a grey pan pastel I've used in the background. And I'm really glad that I've managed to keep that impact and use some really nice colours to finish these dragons off. And that takes us to the back cover. So I talked at the beginning of the video about covering this in plastic and that in future I would colour the cover first. This was the very last page that I did, and what's happened with it is because it has been moved about and stored, and because the cover itself, the actual dust jacket comes all the way off, you know, you can take the whole thing off the book, and this was constantly being slid in and out of a bookcase. And what that's done on the back cover is it's actually squashed the tooth of the paper. So I had a really hard job colouring this. And if I just zoom in, you can see the quality of the pencil work is actually very poor. And that's not anything to do with my skills. It's just because the paper was smooth as a baby's bum. So that's a lesson learned for the next time I decide to take 5 years to finish a colouring book. And if I just do this, I think this is a sort of a very good testament to what's going on. If you look at the difference between the colouring from the front cover, which I was very pleased with at the time, to what I've produced on what turned out to be substandard paper, that just sums up my colouring journey in the last 5 years. And this book has been enjoyable. It has seen several house moves. It has seen the loss of two of my favourite, I was going to say people, I considered my dog a person. It's also seen the arrival of Pip as well. I'm quite interested to look and see actually where she would have factored into this. Because we got her in 2018. So I'm thinking that Pip must have come in around here somewhere. I don't actually know. Because that would have been, yeah, that was January of 19. And we got her, I think it was around like November time. So yeah, Pip would have come in round about here somewhere. God knows how I managed that. She was an absolute handful when she was a puppy. But yeah, so, you know, this book's seen me get married as well. And as I say, it went on my honeymoon to Mauritius with me. So I have quite an emotional attachment to this, and I'm really, really glad that I've completed it. if I never complete another colouring book in my entire life, at least I can say I've done it, and I did it with a good one. So I've learned so much, and a thank you to Johanna Basford for creating such a wonderful and pretty book as well. I have decided my next front to back project, there is going to be another one, is going to be The Ink House by Rory Dobner. It is a beautiful, beautiful book, and I'm really enjoying colouring in Geraldine, so you can look forward to seeing that completed. Hopefully it won't take me 5 years to finish like this did. But I hope you have enjoyed this, and that has brought us to where we are in terms of colouring. And I think that's a testament to the fact that if you decide you enjoy it, you can always develop and learn your skills, because I was learning things right up till these very last pages, and I'm still learning. And that's the beauty of doing something like this, because there's no pressure on you other than the pressure that you put on yourself. So I hope that you've enjoyed looking through this with me, and it's maybe going to give you some inspiration for your colouring. I want to thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all the support from all the colourists, and also from the artists who have dabbled in adult colouring because of things like this. So please look after each other, stay safe, and I will see you back in the cave tomorrow for the final video of Cavemas. Jingle bells to everyone.